At the American Labor Museum, and I'm going to share another labor arts project with you. This is a visual arts project too, and we'll begin with a traditional Appalachian folktale. You may know that Appalachia refers to the area of the United States that runs along the East Coast where there are many mountains, and it is a rural area. This story, this traditional folktale, is about two farmers, and it's taken from a book that is in the museum's library, which you're welcome to look at when you visit us, or you can borrow. We have a free lending library. I'm holding up an illustration that shows you the setting for this story. It is two farms. So let me tell you about the story. In this story, two farmers are neighbors. They've known each other for a very, very long time. They are friends. One day, a calf, you can see the black animal in the illustration, wanders onto their properties. Nobody knows who it belongs to. The calf wanders back and forth to both farmers' land, and then one day, one of the farmers puts the cow in his barn and says, "You know, this calf belongs to me." And his neighbor farmer gets angry at him because he feels the calf belongs to him. They have a conflict. We see conflicts every day, don't we? People who get angry at one another and have fights and disputes. Well, these farmers get so angry with one another that they stop speaking to one another. One farmer goes up to the pond above their properties, digs a ditch, and then floods that ditch with water from the pond and creates a creek between the two farms. Neither farmer can walk back and forth to either's home, and the farmer who dug the creek, made the creek, makes the other farmer very angry. So one day this other farmer has a visitor at his door, a carpenter. She brings lots of tools and is looking for work. So he says to her, "I have a job for you. My neighbor was very spiteful and made a creek separating us. So I would like you to do one better. I would like you to build a fence, a high fence along that creek so I don't have to look at my neighbor anymore." He takes his wagon and goes to town, and the carpenter pulls out her tools and gets busy. She nails and saws and works all day. When the farmer returns to look at her work, he sees it and his mouth drops open. She said before she worked, "I think I can build something that you will like." And what he sees when he returns is not a fence, but a beautiful, well-crafted bridge with railings and all. And the bridge goes from one side of the creek to the other side of the creek. Just as the farmer looks at this bridge that the carpenter created, his neighbor eyes it too, and his neighbor starts to walk over the creek. His neighbor is happy. He says to his neighbor, "I never could have built anything like this bridge. You really did a great job. I'm so glad that we will be friends again." And the farmer who had the bridge built by the carpenter said, "You know, that calf always belonged to you. I always knew that. I'm glad that we're friends again too." Then he turned to the carpenter who built the bridge and said, "I would love for you to stick around. I have many projects for you to work on here at my farm." The carpenter began to put her tools into her box and hoisted them onto her shoulder and began to walk away. She said, "I would love to stay, but you know, I have a lot of bridges to build." And this ends the story. The story reminds us that in our neighborhoods, in our homes, and in our schools, we see friends who disagree, who have conflicts all the time. And there are others who help them restore their friendships, to help them rebuild the bridges that connect them in their homes and in their communities. So the lesson of this story is we have to remember that friendships are important, that our neighbors are our friends, and that we have a role to play as bridge builders in our community. This story inspires us to make an art project today, which I call a barn quilt. This is an example of a completed one that I made the other day. It represents our communities or homes. Each block, triangle, or square is you or I. And together, we make up a tapestry in our communities. We're all different, but we need one another, and we work better when we work together, when we're friends. So let's be bridge builders, and let's make our barn quilt. What you'll need is a blank piece of paper and a ruler, a pencil, scissors, and a glue stick or some type of glue. I often use paper that I find in my recycle pile. Today I use some Sunday comics from my newspaper. Sometimes I find scrap pieces of paper I use for other projects. Well, I can use them for this barn quilt too. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a full piece of paper and measure 8 inches by 8 inches to make a square. And then you can see I've already cut out the square backing of my quilt. What I do then is take my pencil and my ruler and mark off every 2 inches across the top, the bottom, and each side, and connect those markings so that I create a grid. And you can see an example of a grid on my pink paper here. What you will have as a result is a square with 16 blocks. Then, once I have my backing, I'm going to take my other pieces of paper and start making my squares. So I'm going to work the same way with my ruler and pencil. Lay out on my ruler, mark out every 2 inches. You have to work with exactness, be patient with yourself, and take your time. Across the top and the bottom and side to side. And then I'm drawing again the lines, connecting the dots and drawing in lines so that I have a grid of squares. Then I'm going to take my scissors and start to cut out the squares. You can see I've done that already. Pink ones, some from my comic paper, some orange ones, and I have started also purple. You need to have 16 of these squares. They're the basis of your barn quilt. Once you have 16 cut out, you're going to start working on designing your quilt, and I have done that already on my green piece of paper. I'm holding it up, but what I'd like you to do is place it flat on your table before you do any gluing. Start to play around with the placement of the blocks. Now please note, some of the blocks I have cut into triangles. Easy to do and creates more of a pattern on your quilt. Once your squares are cut out, fold them corner to corner, and along the fold, you'll take your scissors and cut them apart to make a triangle. You can even make them smaller by folding them again and make smaller triangles. As you can see, as I've started to lay out my quilt here, I placed the squares from the comic pages on the corners. I cut triangles out with the comic paper to add in the center, and then I began to play around with the other colors and shapes. I think I'll put another pink square up here at the top. As you can see, each side is similar in my quilt. You may fill up all of the squares, or if you use a color backing like I've done here, you can leave the green show through in your quilt. You can make many barn quilts in this manner. And as you do, remember the story of the two farmers in the traditional Appalachian tale. When conflicts happen, bridge builders can solve those conflicts. Are you a bridge builder? Can you help people mend their broken friendships and bring us all together in our communities? Remember, we all work better when we work together.